ring?
Yes.
Yeah, we're way ahead, we just helped ourselves, hook it on. We helped ourselves. Well, there is the cabinet. No, not that cabinet.
Holly is with us. The meeting is now being live streamed.
Here, hold on, switch these there.
Oh,
Okay, there.
and
Where
so
is Dr. Glenn?
Dr. Glenn is in the middle of finishing a proposal that she must
Pleasure to meet you.
get.
Thank you.
Dina Snyder, Paul Mitchell.
We met via email, but
Yes. And we are live streaming. Dr. Glenn had to finish a proposal for work.
oh,
So we are fine. We have our quorum.
we have to pay the bills.
I know, got to. And so whenever you are ready,
Do we
Chair Mitchell.
Do we have the handouts? And they're attached right here. So Sika, I don't know who, when it comes to the roll call, Jacinta, do you want to take the roll?
Yeah. She
Very
does.
nice.
But you gotta officially call the meeting to order.
I have officially called this meeting to order.
At 3:40. And then you can turn it over to Ms. Jacinta.
Thank you. Jacinta, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll.
Commissioner Cummings. Here. Lieutenant Hannah.
Here.
Dr. Glenn. Mr. Mitchell.
Here.
Chair.
Thank you very much. If I could also, I know everyone's got the agenda, if we could maybe get the agenda approved with a motion.
I move adoption of the agenda as prepared.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Superintendent. Without objection, show the agenda approved. Which brings us to public comment. Is there anyone on the phone? Are there any written comments? I do notice that there's no one physically here.
And we do not have phone access.
And we have no phone access, so it'll make it difficult for somebody to call in.
We do not have any public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. Before I go on, did we say something? I mean, does the receptionist know that if somebody shows up to send them in?
Yes.
Very nice. Okay, this brings us to kind of the meat of why we're here, and that's the formulation of a committee recommendation for the millage rate. The recommendation that we've got here, Jacinta, is based on several different options. The A is is the current millage rate and what it would generate
Correct.
based on the property appraiser's valuation of 21,424,000,000, blah, blah, blah. That would, as you can see, generate, it actually, well, you see what it generates. Then if we were to, I asked Sika to back into this, one is the same percentage, the same millage rate, one is the same dollar amount, raising the exact same dollars as we did last year. And that is option B, which is a millage rate of 0.343. I know what option D is, and that's the full millage rate. We have the authority. And I don't know what 0.4375 is, and I apologize about that.
You just asked us to give you a point in between.
Oh, that's right.
And that's what
Okay, that's halfway. Oh, thank you. I'm like, I know there's a reason for this, I just don't know what it was.
I'm sorry, it's in between where we are now and the max.
and the
that we can-
max.
okay.
Really just kind of giving us a flavor as you
Right.
move the dial, what does it look like? Based on the question that I posed to the council at our meeting last month, it seemed clear that everyone was on the leave the millage rate the same because people get used to the millage rate And I will say that just something for consideration. You know how I voted last year, and I intend to vote with the majority this year. I think people get just as used to a dollar amount as they do a percentage amount. And that if you change, well, and I was, if you had asked me 1 year ago when the superintendent made the original motion of 0.5, I would have said, oh, see me in a year, I am definitely on board for 0.5. I wasn't last year because I didn't think we could spend the money, but I definitely think we'll have a need and we can use that money. And so I find myself in this weird spot that I definitely don't want 0.5. I heard what everybody said about keeping the millage rate the same. And then I looked at the numbers that came out just yesterday in terms of real live numbers of how this economy is affecting people. And I don't think, I mean, a $200,000 house appraised at a tax value at $200,000, it's $75 a year. And I don't want to make it sound like I don't think $75 is real money. It's real money. But I don't think that rocks anybody's world by itself. But when you add that $75 to the other increases in their life, because the millage rates are staying the same, and Commissioner, you have this unenviable task of having to vote, twice on it, and then you recognize that people are going to a grocery store and they buy a dozen eggs. I mean, just all of a sudden it becomes real to an awful lot of people. And that is the only reason. I think it is minor, the difference between 0.375 and the 0.34375, whatever it is. But I do think it's a message, and it's just one to consider. Again, I think that I was not just the minority, I think I was the minority of one listening to the voices last month. I just don't know if anything has changed in a month. And not only will I be voting with the majority, I'll be voting with the majority of the three of us. So I want to make sure that what I think is the minority view is put on the table. And would love both of your thoughts.
Okay, I'll just weigh in very briefly. I'll probably reiterate what I said at the meeting without a whole lot of elaboration. I guess my primary concern is the children. I'm in favor of keeping the millage rate where it is. I don't want, and I understand your concern, and I certainly have sentiment for our community about the inflationary issues that we're facing right now. But I don't want to send the wrong message to Leon County residents that on the heels of having gotten our needs assessment, that for some reason we're reducing the millage rate, that perhaps the need for our children is not as great as anticipated or as the study, demonstrates. We've had study after study. We had a study before the citizens agreed to adopted the measures that generated the Children's Services Council. So we just had all kinds of studies. We know our children need services on so many different levels. And I just think reducing it would send an overall bad message to the voters, the constituents, that, well, the issue is not as grave. I think maintaining it where it is, even though we know the property values have gone up, we will bring in a little bit more money because of that. I think that'd be a plus for our children. And I really don't think that property owners are gonna get bent out of shape at all. I recognize that we're all having issues with gas prices and other issues, but I think it might I don't want to upset the apple cart. Right?
Yeah.
That's basically what I'm saying. I think that we can just maintain where we are, take away all the sensationalism. If we reduce it, just leave it where it is and keep rolling and let, Ms. Green and her staff plug in there and do what we can do for our children.
I respect and value your position on this. And I'm not, there's some things I'll fist fight over. This isn't one of them. It's $600,000 and I certainly respect your opinion, Paul. And, I would probably rather leave it as is, but I'm not really, not super strong one way or the other. I think I heard Liza sitting next to me, which a lot of times she aligns with you, even say that she thinks just for continuity and consistency, that it would probably be easier not to every year adjust it up and down based on the economic conditions of our country. But look, I made the mistake of opening up my retirement account the other day. Like,
Don't do that.
Don't you? I said I made the mistake.
Don't retire. That's the answer.
No, I can't now. Hell, I'm looking at my next. I'm like, all that money I put in, I'm like, where'd it go?
Oh, my God.
So, and I do, I mean, it's tough sledding right now. And you're coming from someone who has more financial resources than many other people in our community. I get it and I understand it, but I just would lean towards leaving it alone. But I'm like you, if I heard other voices saying, to your point, they think we should reduce it to 34, then I would go along with it.
When I get mine, this is kind of how I thought about what Liza had said, and Commissioner, you made a point that nobody else made, and I don't think you made the last meeting about not sending the wrong message that the need has been reduced, and that is one that I gotta tell you, right? You know how like you make a check mark, like, bing, there's a winning argument, that's a winning argument to me, and I will say, that was persuasive. My issue is when I get my tax bill, and I get the trim notice, I open it up and I have never once looked at a percentage. You know what I look at? There's three columns. Here's what you paid dollar amount this year. Here's what, if nothing changed, you paid this year. And here's what the proposal, what your new tax, I look at real numbers. I don't look at 0.375 or 3435. So I kind of, that argument to me, your argument is a better argument. I think that one, all of us are supposed to keep our minds open because the public has to comment. I think from a recommendation standpoint, bringing the two numbers together to the council, and it based so that for public discussion, again, I believe that the council ultimately will go with 0.375. I've heard, from the public at that meeting, and I certainly heard from individuals privately that, they wouldn't be happy with 0.343, whatever it is. So I'm not, again, it's not the 600,000, if that's in somebody's checking account, that's a lot of money. But what we're talking about in terms of the difference of how I look at something, what's the real number difference? It really is not a significant number for the Children's Services Council, or by the way, for all property taxes. I just think it's sort of symbolism, and I am not one to, throw myself on any sword for symbolism. I'm all about substance, and I can go truly in this case, be very comfortable voting for 3.7 or 0.375 as it was last year. If it was a secret ballot, I would vote 0.343. But I think if we brought both forward, that's what we would ask the public to comment on. Obviously, they can comment on 0.5, and they can comment on 0. no taxes. But at least giving them, that's our focus. We have one of two choices, and it's essentially leave the millage rate the same or leave the amount collected the same. The same is in both of those equations. And again, I have a funny feeling that your argument, Commissioner, of what message are we sending? Is the need any less? No, in fact, it's even more, even with inflation. I mean, I've argued with myself. I really have. I am torn on this one. But, okay, all right. So
if you want to entertain a committee motion to bring the two options to the council.
But before we do that, I just want to make sure from Jacinta, we don't have public comment. Because there's no public comment. Thank you. Now, I think your point, Ms. Green, is a good one. And that is looking for a recommendation from either of you that of what we should bring forward to the council. And oh, by the way, before I ask you for either one, if you would prefer just to go with one, it won't hurt my feelings at all. I wanted to offer that as an option. If you want to go with one, like I said, I'm voting with the majority.
Okay, well, Mr. Chair, I move that we make a recommendation to the full council to maintain the millage rate where it is at 3.75.
Okay.
Oh, is it 0.37?
Yes, it is.
0.37.
I'm not gonna second it. I respect Paul, and I'm fine bringing both of them. I think you feel strongly about bringing both of them.
Would you be okay?
I'll accept an amendment. Yeah,
Okay.
bring them both before the council.
So I'd like the amendment to also reflect that we're gonna bring option B or 0.34.
Okay, so if Commissioner Cummings accepted the amendment, we still need a second. To the new one.
Second.
Okay,
So without objection, show the fact that we are bringing two recommendations to the board for their consideration and the public's consideration. And that is option A and option B.
Absolutely. We will do that.
Thank you both.
okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Superintendent. A formulation of the draft budget. Is that- Okay. I know that there is one item that I don't know anything about yet, but I'm looking at Jacinta because I think you've had the conversation with our folks on AP equipment, right?
We've reached out, but I don't know that we've gotten any response.
So I talked to Adria. Well, let me do this. Review of the draft budget. Okay. So we met with CPA, we being Jacinta, Sika, and I met with him and went through kind of the full budget. To Sika's credit, it is so easy to be the editor. It's so hard to be the author. So I sat back, I'm like, well, let me take a look at this. I'll shoot holes in anything, right? But at the end, I think we came away with a really solid budget that we could hang our hats on. There were two outstanding issues. One was the issue of how we are going to portray rent. If you guys remember, there's one of the negotiation hangups with the landlord was because they are putting so much into construction costs and new carpet and paint and all that. There is a provision in any government contract that says the government has the ability, if funds are not allocated, to make this contract go away. Now, the landlord, by the way, is a landlord who only has government tenants. So he's very used to this provision, and I signed a contract with him when I was back at the Department of Education, and he seemed to be okay with it. But in this case, again, I get everybody's a little tight in the law these days. So we signed an agreement with him that basically said, we will put in reserve to prove to you that we're not going anywhere. We will put in reserve rent for 2 years. And that made him comfortable enough to sign the agreement and to begin construction. At the time, our move-in date was going to be September 1. And so I got, Chris sent me the email, the attorney with Brian Miller Olive sent me, Mr. Rose sent me a memo kind of explaining that if our contract is set for September 1, so if we're not in on September 1 and we're in on October 1, we're not paying that month's rent. So that will probably have to be redone. He also offered a suggestion in that memo. How do we reflect on a budget 2 years worth of rent? In other words, for this year, we would be showing double, and next year we would have no rent. So he's essentially offered, the column will show 1 year of rent, whether it begins in September 1 or October 1, doesn't really matter. That's what we'll show in column 1. There will be a line item that shows in reserve for that purpose, so it'll be designated. It will sort of stand as a line item all to itself. So for if you're looking at our budget, you're like, what's this $87,000 or $91,000 for, that's held in reserve? You've got your 5% reserve. That's what it's going to be, and it's only going to be for, this is 2023, 24 is where it will always, and it'll just kind of be in a column until 2023, 2024. So it'll just be there. And it gave the landlord enough comfort that we are setting money aside for him.
So that's the only year that would be affected, because I guess we will have been in the lease and then he has a certain.
He's recovered.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
recovered all of his
Okay.
upfront costs.
Okay.
So if I may, Chair, so that that one line would be there for fiscal year 22, 23. It will reduce down of the rent that we paid, and it ends up being, if we had gotten in on September 1st, it would have been like $72,000. Then in the next fiscal year, which would be 23, 24, that reduced amount would be in that line because we agreed to hold 2 years. So we would literally do this for 2 years.
Okay.
After the 2 years, the rent will reflect in the budget because we will no longer be under that, and we should be fine, and we will be under a lease that says, due to non-allocation, we are not liable to it.
And remember, so 2022, 2023, we're going to show our rent.
That's the budget coming up.
That's the budget coming up.
Mhm.
There's going to be a little slide for 23, 24. But when we do this next year,
Mhm.
that 2023, 2024 won't be there anymore. It'll fall into the current.
Oh, I see what you.
So,
Okay.
right, so we're just putting aside 2 years upfront. One in this year column, one in a reserve column with a little asterisk next to it. The only other, and you can kind of look through, I think we have gone through, and if you've got any questions, I think I have an answer, or Sika and Jacinta have an answer. There were a couple of issues. One, as it related to the equipment that you're looking at here, Superintendent and Commissioner, the ability to, now, we could be zooming up here, or we could be zooming, there's a screen that falls down here. That technology is really not very expensive. There, and I sort of scrutinize this a little, probably overkill, but in the budget, it was like $10,500 a year. So it was a lot of money for 5 years. because we are entering into not just an equipment purchase or lease, but also a maintenance. And this still remains to be seen, but what Jacinta and Sika are doing is for using us as an example, this firm as an example, we have the highest technology of anything. I mean, like, there's nothing. It's like being here, honestly, if you were on the other side of this call. And the technology, I get technology changes, but this technology will last 5 years. I think grand total, we might have spent, $12,000 and we own it. So we just want to be good stewards of the funds. It's a lot of money for AV equipment, but it's an important aspect from a public perspective that somebody can dial in and Zoom call us or watch online. So we want to make sure we get it right. That was one issue. The other issue that stood out was sort of a public engagement dollar amount. And Sika,
Yeah, we flipped. So if I may, just on the AD, the other thing I want us to keep in mind is that we're opening our facility up for other people to use. And if they damage it, then we gotta replace it. So I just want to put that in there. But on the PR campaign. So if you remember, part of the recommendations through the needs assessment was a branding and outreach campaign so that people would know what the CSC is doing. And so in the line item that says public relations, we have put $50,000 in there, and that would be for the Leon awareness and branding campaign. And that's reduced from 100,000, where we were gonna try to do like 2 different campaigns, but rather just look at doing the one. As we get into our location, as we look at getting street teams, as we look at doing all of that, that makes the public more aware of what we're doing. The council elected to hold off on that and not do that in the summer recommendations, because we wanted to have some outputs from the summer to be able to use in the outreach and the branding and the awareness about what we've done and what we've funded. So we made that change here.
the other kind of an important point about the dollar amount that's set aside for, and I always hate the term, I like the term public relations. I hate it in when it comes to government, it's like, well, you are public, aren't you relating with the public already? But it's not really public relations, it's just sort of it is a branding and an awareness and an outreach. It also is a dollar amount that can be flexible, so it doesn't have to be 50,000. One of the things that I keep saying this to, for Sika is like, how many hats do you want me to wear, Paul? But this is really like her gift from God, So if she comes to us and says, I'm a pro at this and we can do it for this amount of money and you're gonna get or we can take the full budget and you're gonna get or you can give a little bit more and get exactly what you're looking for, then the council can make that decision. This was really a $50,000 placeholder, recognizing that we have the benefit of an executive director who does have a gift in this. So
we anticipate that their expenditures,
it's true.
depending on what level, we anticipate that it wouldn't exceed that amount, is what we're saying, for this year.
I don't expect it.
From 0 to 50, okay.
Yeah, I don't expect it to. If it looks like we can't, understanding that prices have gone up everywhere. My plan is to look at some sort of RFA or ITN that allows the companies that submit to match it.
Okay.
So if we're gonna pay this, then if you can match some of that in kind, then we could possibly end up with either a 1-for-1 match, so we pay 50 and end up with $100,000 plan. And I believe we have enough companies around that would be interested in that. So that's all.
She's turning into a tight one like you need to set up.
So Chair, if you'll allow me, there's one more thing I'd like to bring to the committee's attention. So went in and shored up a little bit more in here as well. And so if you look under program investments,
Are we on the front page?
we are on the back page.
Back page.
On the back page. And it is highlighted in kind of a blue-purple number. We looked at putting the program investments in 3 or 4 buckets. So our priority funding, we would look at about $6,112,000 for that priority funding. For summer funding, we look at a 1.6 again, which is about where we were this year. And then innovations funding. So this funding would be to help solve a problem. So we've got a problem. We know it needs to be addressed. We don't see any evidence-based programming that's out there, but rather something promising, something that maybe hasn't been done before and there's not a model. So that's what that innovation funding would focus. And then last, the capacity building. So as a council, we committed to helping our community providers have capacity and build capacity. So that's what that is. So in grand total, we'd be looking at total program investments of 9.3 million, which is 85.14% of this budget. And I am very excited about shuffling some things around so that we're getting about 85% of that $10 million that's going into programming. And so I wanted to bring that to you all's attention.
And this also is flexible, right? See,
Oh,
it's,
yes,
there's nothing hard and fast if,
This whole budget is flexible.
well, but especially how the council will award grants on a going forward basis. It's just kind of, I think it's a great idea. Again, we're speaking to the community.
I like the category.
Here's where we're prioritizing.
Yeah.
But the funding for the programs is part of this particular expense
Yes.
item? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Everything else is mostly operational.
okay.
This will specifically speak to our needs in this community. And that is really exciting. You'll see that we've got our mandated reserves there, and so our rolling reserves ends up being about 701,000. And so this is what the budget is at 0.375 mil. If the council approves to reduce that millage rate, then my plan would be to go in and reduce this budget in accordance with that millage rate. So instead of going in and reworking all the numbers, we'll change the millage rate and it'll all shuffle through and we'll give that to you. Matter of fact, what we may do is go ahead and do that so that we have that budget prepared just in case the majority of the council.
Yeah, one kind of final note is related to, you remember this time last year, I made a push for a 5% reserve. That is, there is nothing magic about it. Most state agencies use that number, but there's nothing magic about it. So, you know, assuming I stay healthy, there will be one more budget that I will be the chair of the committee for. What I am hopeful is this time next year, after we are essentially saying 3 years of reserves and we haven't touched those reserves, the next fiscal year, people can look at reducing that 5%. Maybe it's down to 2.5%, because we will we will have way more than 5% of our annual budget in reserves. And that is really what people look at. We have a benefit that most state agencies don't have, because that reserve rolls into their next year's
So that
budget.
was my question, does it just accumulate, and it does?
In our case, we've set it up so it does accumulate.
Okay.
That also will be long after the three of us have left the council. That leaves the next council when there is a hurricane that hits, when there is a place to go for that rainy day fund. And that was the whole reason that I fought for it, and the council was, I think did the right thing. And I think a couple of years from now, whoever's got the ability to use that money is gonna be glad that they did. But I do think, rolling it over, probably one more fiscal year, the council will be kind of set. And leaving that in reserves, here's the one thing, Rocky. While our retirement funds are taken into the shorts, if you have cash and you're investing cash right now, you're actually, there's return on your money. So our reserves, once they are properly managed by an asset manager in safe government-backed bonds.
That will have a quick option of liquidity if we need it. So
Yeah.
that is what Councilmember McFadden
Right,
is spearheading.
right.
And we will actually earn real interest here, whereas right now we're not. We're not losing any money like our retirement.
All right, so I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, I would have expected that our rollover was much more than $3 million from this year.
Well, we are currently at 4.8. It could be more. That's the guesstimate. So,
I mean, other than a needs assessment and some salaries and attorneys and a CPA and the summer money we just do out there, we
okay,
should have, I would think, more than $3 million.
well, we might. So right now we are sitting on about 4.8 million. We've got to finish the rest of the year out. And then
What other expenses do you have if we're not getting out any more money?
well, we've got furniture, we've got our money in reserve. So looking at what we will use for the rest of the year, but we also have to have money to start the new year off. Because remember, we don't get our
Yeah, there is a little bit of.
Ad
fluff
valorem.
a month.
a little bit of fluff because we won't get our ad valorem until almost December or January.
Well, it begins we'll get the first draw about November 7th is when it will come down.
And we'll know exactly what that is. That was just a guesstimate done on a percentage. We'll know exactly what that is at the end of September, really closer to September. So when we approve the final budget, the actual rollover number will be in there. So it probably will be more than 10 million.
Okay, all right, that's the first thing. The second thing is when I add all of these expenses up, and you're saying we have no number now for rent for 22, 23.
And we have,
So when I add all this other stuff up, the compensation and benefits, the contracted services, and then the 230,000 that the tax collector charges us, along with all these other fees, it's like 1.2 million. It's 1.2 million without rent. Is that, because I can't see a total anywhere. I see a total of the compensation and benefits, contracted, I don't see a total after that. But when I had just quick math in my head, it was around 2 million.
oh, yeah, so what I think we will need to do, no matter what, I don't know what the total is, but what we'll need to do is have an administrative total, basically, and then the program investment total, and then, so two subtotals, and then adding those together to make the total. if you, just doing quick math, 3.1 million plus 6.1, so it's $9.2 million. So 9.33 is the total programs. And so 9.33 plus 3 is 9.7. 9.7 minus 10.9 is 900,000. So would that be the total, was that the subtotal that
So,
superintendent's looking for is about 900,000 in?
right, so what I need to do is I need to add a line in that shows what the total expense is.
Yeah, but I think that is it. I think it's 900,000 because if you see 515 plus 245.
Right, so I added 515 and 245, and I added all that below, 230, all the way, all those numbers on the back page.
Yeah.
It came to 1.2 million.
Yeah, I think we need a subtotal. Then
We'll
we'll
add
start
the-
with
yeah.
that lower and going down, you know.
It was on the bigger spreadsheet that we worked from 2 weeks ago. It was,
I probably hit a line.
Yeah, go-
A couple lines that I should.
go back to that one because that one looked right. It's easier to read.
And I still don't understand so for rent for this year, you wouldn't put 72,000 minus 1 month, so 60,000.
So what
Whatever
I'm,
the number is.
No, we will put it in.
You will put a number in there.
Yeah,
yes, but it'll sit to the side because technically we are taking the 72,000 out of this year's money.
it's gone.
We're taking that out of this year's
We've already
money.
paid for rent.
Out of the 4.8 million that you just told me about.
Right,
Okay, out of this year's money, we've paid rent for 2 years?
No,
Just
well, we've paid
We
for
set it.
1 year. We've kind of set aside for 2
for
years.
2 years.
The 1 year that's actually paid for that we're going into, that came out of this year's funding. We're putting money in reserve for next year, for this time.
So you have it a year in advance. So last year's money's paying for the rent this year, and then we'll set aside money this year for the next year. So you have a year in advance.
And if the truth be told, last year's money paid for both. We just are rolling last year's money, the 70-something thousand dollars in rent.
How much is it a month?
It's different each year, but it's about 6,000.
Each year, the first year is 6,226.
Yeah, so
So it'd be 6,226 for the first 2 years. So that would be for
yeah, 72,000.
22, 23, and 23, 24.
Right. That money, if you look at when this was the most complicated part about describing the budget a couple of months ago, is that money came out of the budget year we're living in.
So if we have 4.8, go back to that 4.8 million.
Yeah.
And is there anything then that precludes us, since we don't have to worry about waiting to receive more money because we have money? Is there anything that stops us from moving faster on getting proposals for
Yes, us.
us? We stop us?
The four of us. We had in this budget to add one more team member, which would be program,
So manpower,
it's manpower, program accountability, and, what is it, research, program accountability and research.
So in the salaries are
Four
1, 2,
positions.
3 salaries.
Four is four.
I'm 1, 2, 3, and then a fourth person that's the
That
TBS
hasn't been
still,
hired yet.
right? And then the $60,000 for Holly, right? Okay.
I was gonna do some quick math.
The other thing I would say, and I understand your point about the rolling reserve. So 5% then turns into 10%, then turns into 15% reserve. That's fine, but I think that I just want to be careful because sometimes I get in trouble. People look and go, well, why are you keeping all that money in reserves if you need it out there? Why are you holding 15% in reserve? My teachers would do that and say, I want to raise, right, Bill?
Well,
So-
and I think when we get to this point next year, remember I said, we will have the benefit of having 2 years in.
You have 10%.
Right.
Reserves.
And as we sit here next year and make that same decision, it may be 2.5%. Everybody may say, no, let's do it one more time. Again, that's a decision that the council should make.
Okay. All right.
I would just say that what you got in reserves after 2 years, based on how aggressive everybody, at least listening to the council, wants to be in terms of funding programs and getting real money out, our reserves really are truly reserves. And if and none of our program funding takes into consideration any hurricanes, any tornadoes, any COVID.
So do you see, and I know that, and I don't know, I mean, are other CSCs in the business of helping children in communities through times of a natural disaster?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are?
Yeah, and they usually keep, some of them actually have a line item that says emergency funding. What I will say is that, because we have the ability to shift if we need to, we have that money in reserves. But we also could very easily shift the innovation, but let's say something comes through and wipes out. You could shift the innovation funding and move it into
What
an
is the
emergency.
innovation?
The 1.5 million.
I know that, what is it?
It is for promising practices. So an issue that there is really no evidence-based practice to try to address. So it's that, Liza called it that prize money funding, but it's the ability to innovate, to solve some of these problems with programs that don't currently exist, which is her point. If the program, so we put, 1.5 million in there. Maybe it's the whole, maybe it's not. But if something were to happen sometime after October 1st, and we needed to flip one of those line items, we could do that.
The nice thing about, again, having more than 5% is 5% that the board can always look at and say, you know what? Go. It's 5% on top of your 5% that we will have this year. Well, it's 5%, right? The 5%, you have to have something in reserve by.
No, it's clear, but we usually have that same 5%.
Right.
And it's 5%,
Right. So
5% of $7.5 million, so it.
Right, so in this case, it will be 5%. We're putting it in reserves, but it can be used at the will of the council. That is, at any point, that 5%, and by the way, so can the reserves. Each time, if you remember, somebody would start talking about something at a council meeting and say, well, that's, that would be more expensive. And I always point to the fact that is why we have reserves. Reserves are not an investment fund, although the interest that's generated doesn't stay in the reserve fund, it goes into the general fund, but nonetheless, it's to be used. But it's to be used for a purpose. Usually, it's just a seat belt that can be taken off and put on as needed.
So it's not part of the procurement, we don't even anticipate that.
Right.
So I would I think what people look at too is how much money did you raise through through taxes, and how much of that, what percent of that went back into programs versus what percent was administrative overhead, and maybe I'm wrong, but if we're raising we're raising 7.6, and we have 1.2 in administrative costs. I think that's that's going to be something that people look to.
And
And I don't know that there's anything we can do about it.
yeah, well,
Well, especially, well, two things I'd say about that is you're right. We want that number to be as low as possible because then that says we're funding programs. The nice thing is, 3 years from now, we're not going to be paying for desks and laptops. We'll pay for one here or one there, but it's not all at one time. Two, to Sika's point about we have been conservative as it relates to hiring staff before a need. And I don't think that the slowdown on the ITN is going to be because of staff. I think that the 4 positions and Holly's position is ample to get, think about it. We got an ITN out on the street. Maybe it took criticism, and I'm happy to answer any of that criticism, but we got it out on the street for summer funding like that. And we have learned from that.
And it was a lot of work going on.
well, if I may, we did it, but but we did it for the purpose of what it was for, and that was to get money out to try to help children and families now.
Right.
It didn't have it has reporting, but not as robust as we would want, this council has said they want. There's accountability, but not as robust as this council, says it wants. So I think that any other ITNs we put out, they are going to be massive is probably too strong of a word, but they are going to be keenly focused on what it is that comes out of that strategic planning. And then that continuous loop that has to be put in place to make sure they're all evaluated, make sure we've got all the iterator. So there were lots of steps. I won't say that we skipped, but that the timeline would not allow us to have.
It was 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, we at least need to give applicants 5-6 weeks to get those in for what we will be asking that they show us in their proposal.
Do we know when the ITN's going out for the big funding? Isn't that on a timeline?
For your priority funding,
Yeah.
we expect the first one to go out somewhere between September and October.
And we're gonna be looking for innovation in those, right? Not as much as the summer.
I think it's gonna depend on how that strategic planning comes
That's
out.
true.
Yeah,
We set priorities and whatever.
Right. right. And so, and actually, we had a meeting right before this. So just looking at what came out of the last meeting, which was focusing on this early childhood piece, right? Can I tell you how many, you already know, how many areas you can do an ITN or an RFA to do that? And so there has to be a decision on what part of that early childhood do we want to target and focus on. Do we want to break it down in the age groups? So 0 to 3. There are specific things that can happen in 0 to 3 that cross all 3 of the priorities. So school age supports and readiness, as well as mental and physical health and stability. So where do we want that to focus? You go up to 5, same thing. You go up to 8, same thing. You go up to 12, same thing. So that's where there has to be some targeting on what we want that to look like. And then from the staff's perspective, I don't think we have the manpower to issue more than 1, maybe 2 RFPs at a time. Because I would expect that when you're looking at $6 million to give out, that's going to be several RFPs. That's not going to be 1. And we need to issue them in intervals that allow us to be able to manage that process. and the information on the other side. And then to use Paul's term, oh, by the way, in March, that is when we will issue a summer RFP so that we've got the applicable time, we're giving you more than 21 days to give us what your summer programming is going to be. And more than likely, it's not going to be where we said, tell us what you're going to do across our priorities, but rather we have information that says we need to look at, let's just say, kindergarten readiness. So we need summer programs that are going to speak to kindergarten readiness. What is your program? What is the evidence base behind it? To try to fill a gap that might be, or I don't know if that's the case, but to fill a gap. So these RFAs moving forward will not nearly be as simple as the RFA we just did. And there will be several of them, and we will need to manage a timeline. So, and we would still have our ESS for our enterprise solutions. We've got that ITN that has to go out, and we've got to come back and evaluate that one. We'll be doing an ITN for the public relations, the public awareness and branding that we'll be doing as well. We'll be doing an ITN for capacity building. We think we know who would do that, but the proper thing to do is an RFP or an ITN to help us with that. So we've got a couple things we're managing in addition to the priority funding that we expect that first priority funding to be ready to go January 1. And then we'd be moving all along from there.
I feel like I got us off topic, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I was trying to do some quick math.
There's always, I think the substance, the programmatic substance is a good answer. It goes hand in glove with the budget. So you didn't get us off at all. From wanting always to make sure that we are sort of aware of what the ballot language says and the statute says about only funding that which does not have another source, and recognizing that there are a lot of dollars in the system that again, if we're doing things correctly, and I can't remember, did we leave it in or did we take it? We left in a grants person, right? On a grant by grant basis.
Yes, so we're calling it grant writing services.
Right, okay.
And so
there are plenty of cooks in the kitchen now there can be busy cooks, but I kind of feel like like managing, especially in this, what is the first real year, you guys getting used to one another, and sort of everybody knows the answer to the question it will serve you well.
So if I might, I did some quick math to add the total expense in, and it's about 1.1 million. I don't expect it to be that high moving forward because you don't have certain things that we will have, but it's kind of an economy of scale.
Yeah, if you bring in a new employee, but if you bring in a new employee, there's a desk, there's a laptop, there's expenses that go with them. Then in year 4, when somebody's laptop breaks or you need a new, I kind of think that to your point, Superintendent, people are going to, and I think rightfully so, ask us to keep the administrative costs as low as possible. And
It's one of the points, the less money you bring in, the higher that margin, that
Yes.
margin is. Like if you bring in 10 million and your administrative costs are $1 million, you're 10%.
Yeah.
Because your administrative costs are all where they are. Now, if you bring in 10 or if you bring in 6, then it's only, then it's 20 point.
I just want to share this. So what I did was I went back in and instead of 3 million, I put in the 4.8, which is where we are right now.
I think I did this right. And it also,
Of course I did.
point out that the reserves count for the total as well. So that makes the bottom line number bigger, which makes the percentage smaller.
Oh,
Holly is the, she is the Excel guru, but I think I did it.
I believe in you, Sika.
I know you do. I think I did it.
Oh, Holly's on the call.
Uh-huh.
The power of faith coming through the polygon.
Oh, I did it, almost, kind of, sort of. So if we go back in, and if we put, instead of the 3 million, we put in the 4.8, which is where we are now, we know it's gonna be less than that. Then we increase our program investments to 87%, 87.27%, with priority funding going up to about 7.9, summer funding staying at 1.6, innovation staying at 1.5. And so the total expense is about 1.7. So if I do that, and we still are trying to figure out how to take portions of our salary and put it into programming, because we'll be doing, so for example, part of what Jacinta will be doing is contract monitoring. Part of what Dina will be doing is overseeing.
Right, but that, to
projects.
the average person, that's
So-
administrative.
Yeah, and I don't want to look.
Yeah, but other CSCs are doing that. They are moving, if you are doing pieces of the program, they are putting that cost into that program.
Well, if you were, okay,
But anyway, let
but
me.
if, right, I would say if Jacinta's monitoring it, that's not, performing the functions. That's an administrative,
in other words, just like.
right, just.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
And I don't want to,
I got
it is what it is. No matter what we do, there's going to be criticism. There's going to be kudos and there's going to be criticism. So I don't want us to overthink it, other than we want to keep, our costs down as much as we can and have as much money going to programs as we can, while also having some reserves in case of a storm or whatever.
Or just a huge need, or some
Right.
unbelievable thing comes through, a great
Right.
program.
But I do think we're gonna need to lay out the total, like Mr. Mitchell said, all of those expenses,
Yeah, so I got a line item in there, so I'll, get the total expense line, I'll add that so that it's adding all of those expenses up. I will add an admin percentage, so you'll see the admin, we'll see that. And then I'm also going to take this and shift it to the 0.343 millage rate, so that we'll have two budgets. One will be at 0.375 and one will be at 0.343.
So I have a question, the tax collector's fees, are those based on the percent, or are they this? So if it was 0.5, it would be 300,000?
Yeah, so it's based on, how the formula, but it's based on what is
What is
collected.
the number that's collected?
Yeah,
Let me ask you a question. See, as we get ready to go into our proposal, I was looking at the general counsel here. Have we gotten an opinion from the general counsel about supplantation? I know the statute specifically says we cannot supplant. Have we, and that could be a lot. Have we asked for an opinion? I think we need one. Let me say this in my other life.
mhm,
I litigated that issue, not on the state level, but on the federal level. Programs where the feds give money, it's always, and all the provisions say are federal, it disallows supplantation.
It's like Title I dollars in our schools.
And the state felt like they were spending the money properly, plugging it into our community colleges, increasing enrollment, doing whatever. And I forgot and spent maybe $10, $11 million, I think. The feds came down, audited, disallowed all that money that was all over the state that was plugged into those community colleges. And of course, we appealed it, asked for a hearing, had a 5-day trial before the administrative law judge, and the judge agreed. He agreed with me that we spent it properly, ruled in my favor. But you know, administratively, it goes back to the head of the agency. So it went back to DC, to the head of the Department of Labor. They reviewed it, and so the agency head reversed the administrative law judge. We appealed it to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal and had oral argument, but at that point, another law firm took it over. But I actually did the trial, and we won. But in the final analysis, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal agreed with the U.S. Department of Labor Secretary that the money was expended improperly, and the state had to pay that $11 million back. Now, I don't know on the state level who would be the overseer, what oversight we would have.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. So,
Someone would have to sue. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
federal government does like Title I audits and things like that.
okay,
And
okay. Well, they just allow.
Department of Education, you know,
Right.
is the one that looks at our
The
books and our records to make sure we aren't supplanting with other
Right.
funds.
Right.
But who at the?
Yeah, that's what I don't know.
Well, so, right,
A
it would
citizen
be,
maybe.
that's, in my mind, I can see a citizen who questions whether or not we have taken the $10 million, whatever the total number is, and spent it properly. And when I say properly, that we have not used CSC funds that could have, to fund programs that could have been funded out of.
Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much.
And it would have to be someone challenging it. And, you know, I would hope that nobody would do that, but I would hope that we're real careful.
But I was just wondering if it would be helpful.
I don't-
Got an opinion from.
So,
Yes.
so,
County.
so we can absolutely get an opinion. I will give you a quick example if I might.
The statute does, I mean, if you look at what the statute says and you look at what the ballot said, that, I mean, you've had the experience of going to trial with a similar thing. I bet you knew what you thought your chances were based on that language. This language, I think, is pretty clear, but maybe not, you know? Actually,
And the difference, like superintendent.
I could lobby it, but I
clearly have that
could lawyer it.
oversight, you know, state agencies, federal government.
Well, like you don't, and I could use, we would probably be the easiest example. You certainly don't want the Children's Services Council giving money to the local school district for programs that are already supported by other tax dollars. Right now, so as an example, we receive monies for special needs kids only in pre-K. And then we receive money from kindergarten through 12th grade, and then if they have disabilities through the age of 22. Prior to pre-K, we don't receive any funding for any kids. So if we're using our resources to help partner or have some skin in the game, we don't get tax dollars for those, you know, for a 1-year-old or for a newborn or for a 2-year-old, only for pre-K kids 3 and older that have learning disabilities. That would be the case where we'd say, okay, well, let's ensure the CSC isn't giving money to the school district that they are already receiving funds for.
Right.
Those same programs.
Right. So 2 things.
I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't know how you do it with all these other agencies that I have no idea the oversight, where their money's come from, and this grant, that grant from the city and the county, the CHSP process, or United Way, or,
Right.
I mean, that's a whole other animal. I don't know how you.
Well, so I'll start with that. I'll start with that question first. So Leon County, City of Tallahassee, United Way, and CSC are in constant communication regarding the funding that has been distributed and awarded, constant communication. And I believe we are becoming very good partners on knowing who's funding what and how and by how much.
But a lot of these organizations that I know from my time on the Big Bend Homeless Coalition Board, most of that money came from federal programs and from other grants. It didn't come from local. I mean, the local money was just a drop in the bucket. Capital City Youth Services, same thing. I mean, they would receive some money locally, but a lot of the money was coming from federal, state and federal grants. And I don't know who in the world receives that.
Well, so with the applications for the summer, we do ask for the operating budget, so we
Yeah,
can
so you
see
show-
how funding
That's
is
right.
for your organization and the
Yeah.
programs you run, so we
Right.
do that. And look at that, and then, of course, the funding, we ask for a separate budget for the program. In this case, we asked for expansion, so it had to be a program that was already in existence, and then show us what that expansion is. I'm gonna use 21st Century Schools as an example. So the statute says that we cannot provide funding to the school district for any programs that are exclusively funded and under the oversight of the school system. We were able to fund the 21st Century Grant because that's CDBG money.
You had 21st century programs with Boys and Girls Clubs and
It's not CDBG, right, and so there are other oversight pieces that go into that, so that's why we were able to support that. And then the next.
they just happened to be on our,
Right.
at our facility.
Right, and we looked into it to make sure we weren't, and we know that there are other CSCs that have done that. We did have an organization that was able to expand a program because of CARES money. So they were able to expand a program because of CARES money and service an entire population. Well, the CARES money went away. So that meant that they would not be able to service all those people. But we couldn't then come in and replace that money because it wasn't considered an expansion. Because we would be replacing lost money and we can't replace lost money. So, so we are constantly having those
Yeah,
conversations.
sounds like you got her.
Yeah, constantly having.
It's
It keeps your mind sharp, it's like Sudoku.
It will probably be, probably 5-6 years from now, somebody is gonna challenge something we've done. And I would say this, the intent is obviously very good. Everybody is trying their very best to follow the law. And if we are going to err on any side, I say erring on the side of funding a need is a good side to be on. And in that case, you're asking for forgiveness. And I think most people will say, okay, and you helped kids? Okay, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. All right, so going back to the agenda.
A
Yes, ma'am.
question about the general counsel. After hearing the executive director, it seems like they're looking at it very in-depth, in case like this, so at this point, I
Yeah,
just raised it,
we're-
but I don't really think we need it at this point.
Yeah, and our general counsel is just awesome, and anytime we even think, all we do is ask, and they give us the opinion, but we are watching that, I would imagine though, as the contracts get, we'll be moving.
So if I could, under item C of number 6, agenda item number 6, with the understanding that Sika is going to bring forward a slightly expanded, the one that we had used for the meeting 2 weeks ago, can I get an approval of this draft fiscal year budget to bring forward? And
Adding in that we will also have, so we want this recommendation to match the first one. So the first recommendation is that will bring A and B to
Yes.
the council. So this recommendation should say, we're gonna bring draft budgets that are congruent with A and B to the council.
Correct. And again, that was made in a motion by Superintendent Hannah, and I believe seconded by Commissioner Cummings.
Yeah.
Without objection, show it approved, and our next meeting date. Do we have a next meeting date, Jacinta, for the Budget Committee? I don't think we.
We do not, at this point, we don't need one. Because the next time we will see everybody on trim will be at the trim hearings. So we'll be at a council meeting on the 21st, at which time we'll bring these forward. Council will vote. We go to trim hearings for the draft, and then trim hearings for the final.
And so we don't have a next meeting date for number 7. You'll have to entrust me with the next meeting agenda when the date is set. And are there any committee member comments that we haven't already?
No, thank you for the information.
Very
Good
nice.
job.
So our meeting is at noon?
It's at 1.
Oh, okay, I got 12 on my calendar.
You did have 12, but
I still have 12.
that's okay, we're going in and fixing it. We had to make sure that we were set for 1, so we'll go in and fix that
Okay.
at 1.
So it's 1.
That's
The
it.
meeting
It's
starts
fine.
at 1.
But we are gonna have lunch, because it's gonna be a long evening, so we're going to be sending menus out for those of you that might want a box lunch before you get there.
So I see it says noon and 1. I've got kind of like a
Both
line.
of them,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll send out menus if you want us to get you a box lunch.
They
we'll have a
already
box-
have out.
Okay,
You should
so
already have-
you should have an email about a box lunch, because it's gonna be a long, we're going from 1 to.
When did you send that?
Did you just send it today?
I sent the box lunch, no, I sent that, what's the day, Thursday, yesterday or Tuesday? It was one of those.
No, I don't know, I just hit stuff.
Tuesday, I sent it Tuesday.
Because we're trying to switch all of our notices from Holly's email to Jacinta's email, so just work with us.
There are going to be a couple more times that somebody shows up late or,
Shows up and it's,
yeah.
So how will still be working with you? Is she?
and yes, so she's
I
gonna
mean,
stay,
She's really good.
and
Lord.
she is
She was
really our
good.
consultant in all these different
But
areas.
she'll still just be independent contractor? Okay, okay.
Staying as an independent contractor.
And that meeting is at City Hall,
Yes,
not the courthouse.
yes, at City Hall. We are in the Florida room, Tallahassee room.
We're in both.
We're in both. So
Very nice.
if
All right.
there is nothing else,
There
we
isn't.
call for adjournment.
Without objection, we are adjourned.